All right, and we are back for the first time with the face cams. How are you guys doing
Yep,
today?
doing great.
Chilean.
Um,
Fortunately, I don't have a face cam. I will be getting one soon though.
yeah, we're
Yeah,
working on it. This is gonna be our 13th podcast. We did a bunch of stuff so far. You guys can check it out on the channel. But this
yeah.
is our first time we
Review.
have. Sorry, this is the first time we had face cam on our podcast. It's a bit of a milestone for us. It's been a month since we started, so it's not really been that long, but we've had some learning curve. But
hmm
we're here, and
Yeah,
today's topic is going to be a lot of topics. It's the free agency just opened today, so it's 10:49 on August 2nd, and a lot's happened today. But I think the biggest news that we'll start with is Kawhi declining his player option for 36 million. So
yeah,
what do you guys think he's gonna do? Because honestly, like looking at what else happened, and we'll talk about it, but the money for teams that were genuinely interested to get him, those teams don't have money anymore. So it looks like
yeah,
he's going back to the Clippers. It doesn't seem like anything else is gonna happen outside of that.
yeah, yeah. And on top of that, he's injured, so I don't know if many teams really want to take a risk on him. If we've seen it obviously pay off with the Raptors when we signed Kawhi, but I don't know if many teams want to take a risk, especially because he commands so much money. So we'll have to see. But most likely, I would say he's probably going back to the Clippers.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it was in his plan to go to the Clippers just to leave after 2 years.
Yeah,
I think in today's NBA, there's a lot of people talking about how it could tarnish his legacy playing for so many teams. I don't see that because LeBron's played for three, KD's played for three, he's on his third team. Like, it just
yeah.
is what it is. Like
It's
players like
just
Shaq, their legacy wasn't tarnished. People just forget about it as time goes on. That Shaq played for Phoenix and Boston and Cleveland. Like no one really thinks about that
that's
stuff.
kind of That's kind of different though, because that was at the tail end of his career. But at the same time, it's first of all, it's just the way the league is now. Players just want to, they just have power, so they want to do what they want to do. And then on top of that, you see LeBron, like he moved around teams, and in my opinion, it's helped his legacy because now he's shown that he can be dominant on multiple teams
Yeah.
and adapt.
I think Kawhi's on the same. He was dominant on the Spurs. He won a championship with the Raptors. And
hmm
it doesn't look like he's going to win the championship with the Clippers anytime soon just because of the landscape of the NBA right now. But even
Yeah,
if he doesn't, Kawhi Leonard's still going to be a Hall of Famer. He's still going to be a multimillionaire. I don't think he's going to lose any sleep over it.
yeah,
Um, I think the next biggest free agent, now that we have gotten the big elephant out of the room in Kawhi Leonard, I think it's obvious who the next biggest free agent is. It's our boy, Kyle Lowry. It's
yeah,
sad to see him go. He's going to sign with the Miami Heat. I think a lot of people when the Miami Heat picked up Goran Dragic's player option, I think it's pretty obvious what was going to happen. They were going to sign and trade him for somebody, just a matter of who it was, and it turned out to be Kyle Lowry. So it looks like they're going to do a trade with Goran Dragic and Precious Achiuwa going to the Raptors, which is great for the Raptors as well. It fills the hole at the center spot defensively, especially. What do you guys think about that
yeah.
trade?
I love it. Just because, first of all, at least we're getting something back for Kyle. I was kind of scared after we didn't trade him way at the trade deadline that we're just going to lose him for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And this way we get a solid veteran point guard and a nice young center. Because first of all, we were lacking at the center spot last year, and he's a young center, so he can develop into something really nice, hopefully.
Yeah, I think the good thing with Precious Achiuwa is the defensive potential is there, especially because he's an athletic freak. Um,
Yeah,
I think offensively he's really raw, but again, as a young player, there's a long way to go for him to develop. But from the Heat's perspective in this trade, it's a big move up. I don't know what else they're gonna do in free agency. They also just signed PJ Tucker as well, so they have a lot
yeah,
of going for them.
yeah.
But
They replaced Trevor Ariza with PJ Tucker, so it works.
well, they're losing Iggy as well now too because they had to drop Iggy's player option to make the Kyle Lowry thing work. I think
Yeah,
they could have just brought him back and throw him in a deal too. The money would have been nice to have, but I think they were trying their best to shed some salary at the same time.
yeah,
But all in all, that deal is great for both teams. Like, because we would have lost him for nothing if he went somewhere else. I don't think the teams he wanted to go to would have been able to just sign him. So it's I think we were gonna get something back for sure. It was just a matter of what it was, and this way we filled a hole on our team. So it's a very positive move for us.
Yeah.
Both win-win on both sides for each teams. As a Kyle Lowry fan, it's definitely going to be fun watching him play alongside Jimmy Butler.
Yeah.
They're friends too.
Really...
People don't know that. Like they became close friends on Team USA. And another story that's circulating right now is that the Heat are trying to figure out a way to get DeMar DeRozan, which would be very interesting. So I think the front runners for him, since teams are really running out of money now, would be the Lakers and the Heat. I personally don't think he fits in well on any team, especially because the Lakers did make the Russell Westbrook trade, which in itself doesn't make any kind of sense.
Yeah, he would not make sense on the Lakers. He would just, it would be even more redundant because they would just have everyone shooting mid-rangers.
Yeah, they would have 3 slashers in DeMar, Westbrook, and LeBron who need the ball and can't shoot off the ball. So it's just, the fit isn't there between the 3 of them. The fit already isn't there with the roster they have right now. But it's going to be interesting.
They need more shooting.
They need more shooting. I think the next biggest thing that happened was Lonzo Ball, ex-Laker. He's going to the Chicago Bulls. Now, the interesting thing here is Lonzo's value over the last 2 seasons kind of went down, I would say.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see that the NBA doesn't really think so, considering he just got a 4-year, $85 million deal, which mathematically would be about $21.5 million per year.
I don't know if he really regressed last year. He really made, in my opinion, he made a really big improvement because he showed that he can shoot 3 at a very consistent clip. And he's an amazing defender, which the Bulls really need.
And
they just need defense.
It's interesting what the Bulls are going to do going forward now with Kobe White, because he doesn't really fit in with Lonzo Ball or Zach LaVine. The fit was always kind of weird there regardless. So
yeah.
I think we should be on the lookout for a move on that front. I don't think they're going to keep him for much longer.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about that? Lonzo could fit there.
I was thinking, I think they could probably trade like some like bad contract that they have on their team and Kobe White for like a nice like wing, like 3-and-D player, someone like that. I don't know exactly who, but they need to really fill that, like the wing spot out, because Patrick Williams, even though he's good, he's very young and raw, so you don't really want to rely on him.
The good thing there is that Patrick Williams, going into the offseason, hopefully he does show some improvement. But
yeah,
Patrick Williams, along with Lonzo, help him a lot defensively. It's going to be interesting to see how it works out, considering they have Vucevic on the back end, because he's a very poor defender. But there's a lot of ways for them to go, and this move offensively, they have a ball movement team now, especially with Lonzo running the point. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all goes now.
Yeah. I kind of just want to go through the players that just re-signed with their teams. So it's like Jared Allen re-signed with the Cavs, Tim Hardaway re-signed with the Mavericks, Mike Conley back to the Jazz, Chris Paul back to the Suns, Bobby Portis back to Milwaukee, which is nice to see. Gary Trent re-signed with the Raptors.
Yeah, that one was interesting to me. He got a 3-year deal for $54 million. And then Norman Powell, a few hours later, got a 5-year deal for $90 million. So the averages on both are $18 million, and they got traded for each other. So just interesting to see how free agency kind of works in that sense, where players that have equal value in trade also get equal value of contract. It's pretty cool to me just to see.
It makes sense.
It makes good sense for both teams, especially for us, because our shooting guard spot would be barren if we didn't get him back. So going forward, it looks nice now for us because our lineup is going to be presumably Van Vliet, Gary Trent Jr., OG, Pascal, and Precious Achiuwa in the starting lineup. And then they'll have their rookie that they just drafted, what's his name? Scotty Barnes. I really wanted them to draft Jalen Suggs, but it is what it is now. In Masai we trust. Like Masai really hasn't made mistakes in the last 6 or 7 years drafting, so we have to trust him.
We'll see what happens. It's
We'll see what
also
happens.
it's not only Masai. It's also that we have a very good development team. So any pick that we get has a good chance of panning out like well.
Yeah.
You know. So, one of the biggest signings from any team is the Lakers, who signed Dwight Howard, Trevor Ariza, and Wayne Ellington.
Yeah, that
Which
was
I love
huge.
all three of those signings. I love all three of those signings
Um,
because
the interesting thing with those signings, I don't think Wayne Ellington, he's a great shooter. I don't think defensively, because he's a weak defensive player, I don't think he's going to get many minutes, depending on how the roster fills out. But definitely, there is a place on this team for Trevor Ariza and Dwight Howard.
yeah,
Again, with the Russell Westbrook trade, they can't start Dwight Howard because you would have Westbrook, whoever, LeBron, AD,
Yeah.
and Dwight. That doesn't really work. I think the Westbrook trade forces them to start LeBron at the 4 and AD at the 5.
yeah.
It's gonna be interesting to see what happens as the rosters fill out.
Derrick Rose also re-signed with the Knicks, so that's good to see.
It's good to see. I think they made some big moves. They also signed Evan Fournier to a 4-year deal. I don't know if his value is what the contract suggests. I'm trying to look for it right now. They signed him. You guys see it? Because there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff on this page right now.
I don't see it.
4 years, $78 million for Evan Fournier, right?
Yeah,
That's what you're
so
looking for.
I think that's a slight overpay, but because it's the New York Knicks, a team that needs that wing help, I think they were willing to make that move, and it makes sense for them, especially because of the season they had last year.
Yeah,
But it'll be cool to see how that plays out. Again, I don't think they're gonna go very deep in the playoffs. I think they overachieved last year, but it's gonna be interesting to see how it goes there now.
I'm honestly most interested to see how Julius Randle does this year because he really did terrible in the playoffs. So
Yeah, he kind
I
of
don't
washed
think
out
it's
in the
going to carry
playoffs.
over. I
I
don't think
hope
it's going to
not.
carry over, but yeah,
Um, there was a lot of like the free agency. I feel like there was mostly point guards. All of them are gone now. Obviously Lonzo,
Yeah.
we talked about, signed with the Bulls. Kyle Lowry signed with the Heat. Goran Dragic got picked up as a part of that deal, so he's no longer a free agent. He's coming to the Raptors, which is another thing that we actually didn't even talk about. We're gonna have Goran Dragic, coming off the bench next year, so we should be a playoff team next year. We have a very good bench.
yeah,
Which with the Raptors has always been historically the case. Our bench has always been very productive, and it's going to remain that way with Goran Dragic. The other
Yeah.
point guards that were on available in free agency were Mike Conley, who re-signed for $72.5 million,
yep.
and Chris Paul.
Devontae Graham.
Yeah, Devontae Graham, he got traded as well today, but Chris Paul, he signed for 4 years, $120 million, which is interesting because the NBA, and Chris Paul is the culprit of this, who brought in the rule of the over 38. Players over 38 can't sign huge contracts, but because he has the bird rights with that team, they're able to make that work. So he's going to be making $30 million for the next 4 years. What do you guys think about that? Going into
I
his
feel like
age, 37, 38, 39, 40 years.
That's terrible for the Suns just because he's 38, so he's just getting worse, honestly, because he's getting older. But it's amazing for Chris Paul because he can just make money, you know? Even if he gets bought out, he's still gonna be making that money, you know?
Mm-hmm. It's
So
gonna
it
be
just works.
interesting to see how that all plays out, especially because they have to pay their young core, as we talked about in an earlier podcast. They have to pay their young core coming very soon now, because
Mhm.
DeAndre Ayton is going into the last year of his rookie deal, as well as
Yeah.
Mikal Bridges, and DeAndre Ayton's worth upwards of $30 million a year, and I would say Bridges, based on how he performed last year, is worth 18 to 20 million himself. So they're
Maybe
gonna
even
have it.
25.
Yeah, maybe even 25. So they're going to have to go deep into the luxury tax. And
Mhm.
their owner historically has not been willing to do that. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play out, considering they're probably going to have 4 max-ish level guys, 20 plus million guys.
Yeah.
3 of them will be 30 plus million.
This was a crazy
Another.
free agency.
Sorry, what was
Sorry?
that?
This was a crazy free agency. I think for all teams, right? Everybody made big moves.
Yeah, all the major players did, and there's a lot of like sneaky good signings as well. Like also Kent Bazemore signed
I
with
didn't
the
even.
Lakers, another 3-and-D player. So I feel like the Lakers are making good moves right off the bat.
Yeah, I think the Lakers are starting to fill out their roster nicely, but it remains to be
Yeah.
seen what kind of 3-and-D player they can get. Because between the players they've gotten so far, they have Dwight Howard, who's just a center who does great things. They part of the reason they won the championship was because of that Dwight Howard. Last year in the COVID bubble. Wayne Ellington has no defense. He's a 3-point shooter. Trevor Ariza is a bit hot and cold. I think we saw in 2018 where he missed they missed 27 straight threes, and he missed 12 of those. So hopefully he doesn't go cold like that because they can't afford to have that happen. But it's gonna be interesting to see how that all plays out again because the Lakers their fit's very janky right now. I would say.
I mean, I feel like their fits janky with their main core, but everyone else around them really fits well with the core that they have. You know, they have 3-and-D players, so it really works in my opinion. Just gonna have to see.
I think the big thing that we're ignoring is that they're probably gonna make a move around like the trade deadline, and as well as veteran players on bad teams usually get bought out, and the favorites for those kind of players are always the Heat, the Lakers, the Nets, the top heavy teams that need to fill out the bottom end talent. So it'll be interesting to see. I think they'll be the front runner when that time comes. But going into the regular season, they need a bit more depth because the regular season is about depth. In the playoffs, the rotations do shorten up to 7-8 guys. In the regular season, you want to have 10 players you can play. And right now, it doesn't look like they have that, especially considering Alex Caruso is also going to the Bulls to team up with Zach LaVine, with Lonzo Ball. They're going to be teammates again. Very interesting.
That's really nice to see.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in Chicago. Chicago's going to be another one of those teams where they should have made the playoffs this last year, especially after the Vucevic trade. And it just didn't go their way for whatever reason.
Chemistry, probably. Honestly, that's the only thing I would chalk it up to because they made that trade, the trade deadline, right? So it took them a while, I feel like.
I feel like with the trade, the signing they just made with Lonzo now, them having Vucevic offensively is gonna be very interesting because they'll have a very potent offense. But I still think it made more sense for them to stick with Wendell Carter. Hypotheticals, we can't talk about hypotheticals because what happened, and the teams are what they are now. And Wendell Carter is going to be a starting center next year, presumably for the Orlando Magic, who in their own right have a bit of a redundancy there. But I think they should have kept Wendell because their defensive identity with Lonzo at the point of attack and Wendell Carter at the back end would have been interesting, especially with Patrick Williams being potentially that lockdown defender in the future. I think they kind of shot themselves in the foot in terms of their defensive potential. And the win now move they made wouldn't really help them go far in the playoffs. I think with Wendell being there, they would have still been a first round out as they would be now. But there's a lot of potential there, especially because Lonzo is still very young.
Yeah.
I think another thing that we're neglecting to talk about here is that I'm pretty sure the Pelicans can still match the contract for Lonzo. I don't think they will because the Bennett family is a bit stingy in terms of their investment into the New Orleans Pelicans, considering they do focus more on their investment with the Saints, the New Orleans Saints, their football team, which kind of sucks because football is bigger in that country, so they are going to put more of their money into that sport, into that team. But
and that team specifically is also really big. There's a lot of fans across the world.
Yeah, that's very true. So. That's true. What do you guys think about Jared Allen? I think he got underpaid a little bit because he got 4 years, $100 million. I think he left some money on the table there.
Maybe. He also has
5 years, $100 million.
Yeah,
so $20 million a year. I think he's worth easily 25 to 27. So I think he did leave some money on the table.
It says it's in the $100 million range, so it could be more or less, could be 110. But even still, he doesn't have that offensive like post game or anything. So he's really just a lob catcher and a defensive player, which is a lot, and he's amazing at what he does. But he's not gonna score more than like 15 points in a single game. Yeah.
he's kind of in that sense a Rudy Gobert type of player, and we just saw
Yeah.
with Rudy Gobert, he's gonna make upwards of $40 million starting next year, and he's not worth
Yeah.
that kind of money because he's the defensive player of the year that got beat up defensively, which is very interesting.
So
Um,
dumb.
but the difference between him and Jared Allen is that Jared Allen switching onto the perimeter is a better defender, and he wouldn't get cooked by Nicholas Batum, which is what happened to Rudy Gobert.
Maybe he could. Who knows? You haven't seen him in that situation really.
Yeah. Another big
It'd be
deal
interesting to do.
is for Tim Hardaway Jr., who also, along with the value that we just saw, Norman Powell got 5 years, $90 million. That's $18 million a year. Gary Trent got 3 years, 54. That's $18 million a year. And then we have Tim Hardaway, who got 4 years, 72. So that also is $18 million a year. It's interesting to see how that is kind of the value for these three and D shooting guards in the league right now.
Yeah.
And those three guys are in the exact same pool of player, and they do the exact same things. I think Norman's the most superior defender out of them, and then Tim Hardaway is probably the most superior scorer, whereas Gary Trent is the most superior shooter. So they all have their skill sets, and their value is equal, which the contracts
Yeah.
show.
But none of them are like even close to like liabilities on defense too, right? So that helps their value.
Yeah, for sure. A liability on defense that just signed with the Detroit Pistons is Kelly Olynyk. They gave him 3 years, $37 million. I don't know for what purpose. I don't know which direction this team's going in. What they do year in, year out makes no sense to me. It's just a very weird team, and
I don't know. I honestly I haven't even been looking at the Pistons, man. They're just like, you have like the entire family, and then the Pistons are just that weird cousin that's in the corner.
yeah,
You know?
yeah.
So
That's
it's kind of just like no one really gives a damn about the Pistons. I don't even think Pistons fans give a damn about the Pistons.
I mean, I think they will now because of Cade, but I don't know how this move helps them in any sense because they're not going to make the playoffs next year. I think they should have just tried to sign one of the younger players that is going to go unsigned, second round picks, players that weren't drafted. But I think them giving them money, they had money just to give to him, so I think that's what they just did. That makes no sense to me.
Yeah, but he's not a bad player. He can shoot the three and he can like rebound and stuff, right? And I feel like he could also help in the development of Cade in terms of like running pick and pops and stuff, getting better at stuff like that. So it's like nice pieces to have, so you can like just develop his overall game.
I think the reason they made that trade is they're banking on the fact that he will shoot very well from three, and he's only getting paid about $11 million this next year. So I think the reason they did that move is so that they could trade him later on and get something for him. Because in this league, especially at the big man spot off the bench, he could be very valuable for a team going forward. A team like the Lakers could use him just off the bench for a shooting punch. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. I don't think they're going to keep him. I think that move just happened to happen. I feel bad for the Celtics in all of this because they didn't get anyone big, and they lost their one big trade that they made last year for Evan Fournier. He's out of there now. He's going to the Knicks for 4 years, $78 million. So a bit more than the average of the Tim Hardaway, Gary Trent, and Norman Powell thing that we talked about. He's making 78 over 4. So it's a bit above 18. It's about 19.5 million per year. What do you guys think about him going to the Knicks and the fit there? Because that's the slot that they really needed to fill.
Evan Fournier?
Yeah.
I mean, he's 100% going to make a good impact. Like he's one of those players that fits in on every team, right? So he's really going to. I mean, he's also one of the pieces that could have helped him in the playoffs. So
I think the interesting thing with him is interesting thing with him is he's pretty good in the pick and roll. He's not like with those players that off the catch they shoot really well, but as soon as they put the ball on the floor, his shooting percentage stays pretty good off the dribble. It doesn't crater like a lot of players. So there's gonna be some on-ball creation and some off-ball spacing. It's gonna be a good fit for them, especially because they do want to focus on building their offense around the Derrick Rose and Julius Randle pick and roll. It's gonna be interesting to see going forward. Just 10 minutes ago, another trade. Sorry, before Barjinder says what he's about to say, Rashawn Holmes was being shopped, or he's looking around in free agency where he could go. He just got 10 minutes ago 55 million for 4 years, going back to the Kings. Just to throw that in there.
That's good.
Yeah. So,
Sorry,
Barjinder,
bro, what were
you
you
saying?
saying?
Yeah, so we talked about on the pod, the Suns, they needed like a backup center. They signed JaVale McGee for a 1 year, $5 million contract.
I like
Wait,
that.
really? That's
I didn't
very
really.
good for them.
I think
I
that's
didn't.
really good for them.
I didn't see that.
Yeah.
As well as some other trades that are pretty good is the Knicks, they got Nerlens Noel to a 3 year, $32 million contract.
No, he was
He's-
on the Knicks last year, but he's definitely a good it's a good thing that they
Resign.
kept him.
Yeah, it's a good thing
Yeah.
they kept him. I think,
Yeah.
especially in the playoffs, he showed his defensive chops. Like, he's a very good defensive player. And he turned down a big contract with the Mavs a few years ago, and they kind of shot him in the knee after that, which was kind of shitty for them to do. But it is what it
Yeah.
is now. He's in a good situation on a winning team, I would say.
It's a good culture, honestly. The Knicks, honestly, is surprising
They
because
turned
they
it
have
around.
one of the worst cultures. But
Yeah.
I feel like that's a team at this point I would personally want to be on.
Yeah.
Seems like fun.
And-
Barjinder, was there anything else?
Yeah, that's about it.
I mean, I think one of the big ones we missed. I don't think we talked about Blake Griffin yet. He's gonna go back to the Nets on another minimum deal. I don't know
Yeah.
why he would do that, considering he is he's at the tail end of his prime, but he's still in his prime. He still has some skills. I think he's dropped off significantly from where he was in 2019
Yeah.
in Detroit, but I still think he could have made an impact somewhere. It's just interesting to see that he doesn't value himself like that.
No, I think it's just he's comfortable in the place that he's in now, right? He just wants to be there. I feel like he likes playing for Steve Nash probably, and he knows he's gonna win too. So
I mean, I think
I
it's gonna be a free ride to a championship for him.
I think the last signing that we need to talk about today is Duncan Robinson, who signed for 5 years, 90 million, which he got the bag.
So that's another shooting guard who got a contract that averages out to 18 million. So I don't know. That's just crazy to me how with him and all the other guys we talked about, there's 5 shooting guards. The top 5 shooting guards in this year's, outside of DeMar, the top 5 shooting guards in this year's free agency are all worth the same. And I think if you look at DeMar's value, what he does, I think he's gonna get the same contract as well.
I think
About
he might
18.
even get less.
He might get.
He
I
goes
think
to
he
the
might
Lakers.
take less because that's what he said.
Yeah.
He might go to a team like the Lakers or a team like Miami, who's trying to get him. The fit again is very wonky there for both of those teams. So I wouldn't want to see him there. Then again, with DeMar's skill set, he doesn't really fit in anywhere in today's NBA, unless he's a lead ball handler.
Yeah.
I think the team that will get him gets a player that has high scoring potential. It's just interesting to see what team that's going to be because, again, his fit's going to be very wonky on a team like the Lakers.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
I got one more thing is Pacers, they signed Torrey Craig to a 2 year, $10 million contract.
Oh, yeah, that's
So
a
they
very good pickup for
stole him
them.
from the Suns. They already were lacking depth, the Suns, so they just lost more of it. That's interesting.
Yeah, honestly, this is less of a good pickup for the Pacers, and it's worse for the Suns because they lost him. They just lost one of their best wing defenders
I
and
don't
two-point
see why it would
shooters.
be a bad move for the Pacers because in today's NBA, you want a lot of 3-and-D guys.
I'm not saying it's a bad move for the Pacers. I'm saying it's more of a worse thing for the Suns than it is a good thing for the Pacers.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You know?
You're saying the bad outweighs the good in
Good.
terms of what happened for the Suns losing him.
Exactly. It's just really tough for them.
Just a couple more nuggets. Just quickly gonna jump through the rest of these. Dwayne Dedmon signing a minimum contract to Miami Heat. He's gonna be the backup center there. Austin Rivers gonna be back on the Nuggets. I think they needed him. He played really well in the playoffs, so he's gonna be backing up Jamal Murray once he comes back. Garrett Temple's went to New Orleans, giving them some wing depth. I think we mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast, but just in case we didn't, PJ Tucker's going to the Heat. 2 years, $15 million. So we were talking off the pod yesterday about how the Heat needed to keep Jay Crowder. I think they essentially just brought back Jay Crowder in the form of PJ Tucker because they do some of the same things on the court.
Yeah,
PJ's a better rebounder.
But they also lost Trevor Ariza, so
I mean, Trevor didn't really play much though, and in terms
he
of
did in the playoffs.
He did. Regardless, I think the big thing for the Heat is that they're filling that up with Kyle Lowry, so it's not a
Yeah.
big deal for them. They're starting to lack some depth considering they're going to lose Precious Achiuwa, but they did
And
replace him.
Dragic.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're replacing Dragic with Kyle Lowry, so it's kind of a toss up there. Obviously, Kyle Lowry is a much better basketball player, but it's gonna be interesting, especially because that team now has another ball handler. I think it's gonna take off pressure from Jimmy because Lowry is gonna be the lead ball handler there, and it's a very nice fit for them because Lowry gives them the space that they need, especially because not that Dragic and Nunn didn't space the floor, but Lowry has more range and he does more other things on the court at a higher level than those two. So it's gonna be interesting to see how that works out.
I feel like the difference between him and Dragic especially is that Lowry has an impact on the actual game. You know, like he changes the direction of it. The Goran Dragic is a player to help you go in the certain direction that you're already going in, you know. But Kyle Lowry can change that.
I think we should be on the lookout next year. I think Goran Dragic has potential to be sixth man of the year because he's a very high level basketball player still, and he's gonna play big minutes off the bench, especially because we have a new rookie on the team, Scotty Barnes, who could go either way with him. I think you don't put much stock into rookies playing well in their first year, making a positive impact. It's going to be a bit of a learning curve, especially because around midway in the season, they do hit the rookie wall and things do tail off a little bit. Yeah. But it's a great move for the Raptors because more than Goran Dragic, they got a really good young center in Precious Achiuwa, who fills a big hole for their team that they had last year.
Yeah. We just needed a big man last year. We just didn't have one. Hopefully he even improves this year, like from what he was last year.
Yeah. I'm just going to name drop a couple more. So Daniel Tice is getting 4 years, $36 million from the Rockets. Again, that's another move that makes no sense. I don't know which direction this team is going in. Similar to the move that they made.
That pickup is honestly like he's not a bad player, but at the end of the day, it's the Rockets. They're rebuilding. You can't really look at that pickup too much.
I think it's the same thing as what the Pistons are doing, bringing in who we talked about earlier.
Kelly Olynyk, yeah.
And Kelly Olynyk. I think they're just gonna trade him away afterwards because he's a good defensive center that a team can use later on in the season. Cody Zeller, he's gonna sign with the Blazers, minimum contract. Corey Joseph, former Raptor, he's gonna re-sign. I think he was in Detroit at the end of last year. I think he's gonna re-sign there for 2 years. $10 million. Another player that honestly is a good, solid backup point guard, but it won't really make a difference considering that Cade's going to play 36 minutes a game. And he's just there to fill in the other 12. There's not much else to talk about, really. It's going to be interesting because all the big names have signed, except for Kawhi Leonard. It's going to be just interesting to see what he does in terms of his contract. I think he's going to stay with the Clippers. Personally, if I were him, I would have taken the $36 million and then re-upped next year for upwards of, I think he's eligible for 5 years, $230 something million. But regardless, NBA is big money nowadays, so he's going to sign a big contract regardless of what happens. It's just interesting to see how much he's going to get, considering he is injured.
I feel like the reason why he did it is because people don't know exactly what he's going to be after the injury, so he's going to re-up for the most amount of money he can now, and just in case like he doesn't come back the same after the injury.
Yeah, because
which I hope he does come back the same, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean we've seen that with a lot of players. Isaiah Thomas is the first one that comes to mind. He was up for a huge extension. He said back up the Brinks truck. No Brinks truck ever backed up for him. He went from making potentially $170 million over 5 years to making $1.7 million, less than 1% of what he could have made potentially, which kind of just sucks for him. Another player that comes to mind is DeMarcus Cousins, who was a star when he got injured, and ever since he hasn't gotten a big payday, and he never will. Looking at where he is, how old he is, and what he does on the court. So I think that's why Kawhi Leonard he just decided to decline it and go for a max extension this offseason. Yeah.
All right, I think that's it for today's pod.
Anything else you guys want to talk about real quick?
No, I think we're good.
It's been real. You guys have a good night.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning into today's pod. Shout out to Kaiser Draws for the logo and YouTube banner. And huge shout out to Vic.Ash for the music. Links to the pages will be in the description below. Once again, thanks for listening. Like, comment, and subscribe for more YouTube content.